All right, so let's get started. So my name is Dr. Melanie Meinzer, and I am the director of the Office of Student Fellowships and Awards at UTEP. And this is a new office. You probably haven't heard of it until you got my email because it started about 10 weeks ago. So one of the projects that I've been tasked with, which I'm very excited about, is running the Hawkins Scholarship. And so to kick off our first year of this scholarship, I went through and tried to find the top students at UTEP. And so this is you. So I'm really glad that you can be here. You're all here because you are candidates for this scholarship. You have to apply, of course, but you are in a group that is seen as very competitive for this opportunity. Okay, so a bit of housekeeping for Zoom. Many of you have probably used Zoom before, but basically you're all automatically muted, and that's to maintain the quality of the audio for this recording. And you're welcome to turn on video during question and answer at any point if you'd like to, but you're certainly not required to. The second half of the session today will be to start working on your personal statement for this application. And so for that, you will want to be able to use audio. You, again, have the option to use video or not. I encourage using video if you're in an environment where you can do that, because this will be a one-on-one pairing. So what I'll do in the second half of the session is I will put you all into breakout rooms in Zoom. So you'll be with just one other person, randomly assigned. And I'll give you a worksheet to start interviewing each other with questions about sort of getting to know each other, getting to know yourselves, thinking about which aspects of your experiences, both in and outside of the classroom, that you'd want to tie into your personal statement. So that will be the second half of the session. Today, what I will do is I'll start out by giving an overview of the Hawkins Scholarship. So I'll talk about the application process, supports offered by my office. Then you'll hear some brief remarks from President Wilson about why the scholarship was created. So this scholarship exists because Dr. Wilson created it. So she is the reason that we're here today. I'll then move to questions and answers. And so I should also add that if you have questions during the presentation, try to hold on to them until the presentation is pretty much all the way through. But if you find you have a question that isn't answered, please put it in the chat. And then when we open up for questions and answers, I'll look to the chat. I know that some of you had some very specific questions about your eligibility. And for those, I think that's best done just one-on-one so that we can look at your particular case. So feel free to email me, studentfellowships@utep.edu. That email is also posted in the chat, and we can talk about that after the session as well. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here and get us started. Okay, share. Okay, let me make sure that I can see the chat here. Where did that go? Let's see. Okay, having trouble seeing the chat, so I can't see the chat for now. Let me make sure, let's see if I can get that. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Go back. Okay, well, I can't see the chat, so I'll just assume that we'll wait until the end. So let's see, chat and pop out. Okay, anyway, I'll get started. Okay, so what is the Hawkins Scholarship? So this scholarship provides two $10,000 awards to two UTEP students. So in 2020, we will award two $10,000 scholarships. And these are for students like yourselves, outstanding intellect and character, committed to the service of others, who show promise of becoming leaders, capable of addressing important challenges facing humanity. So that's purposefully broad. And although you may recognize some names in the attendee list, you are all from different colleges, different majors across UTEP. And it is, oh, now the chat's showing up there. It is a scholarship for every student in every college. So in terms of eligibility, you can be a citizen of any country. You have to be a junior, so this means that you have to have between, I believe it is 60 to 89 credit hours. I can double check that number, but I believe that's roughly the span of it. And I know some of you had some questions about eligibility related to that. The GPA minimum is 3.7. You have to plan to complete your undergraduate degree by the end of the summer of 2022, so that would be next summer. Some of you have graduation dates in May, so we left that window open May, June, July, August. Another important criteria is that you have to have plans to attend graduate school the fall after you graduate. So if you apply for this scholarship, it's because you intend to apply to graduate school in the fall of your senior year or whenever those deadlines are, with the intention of enrolling right after you graduate with your bachelor's degree. There's also an age range, so you have to be at least 17 years old and not older than 23 years old by October 1st. So the deadline for the scholarship is October 5th, and you have to meet the eligibility criteria by October 1st. Oh, and I wanted to add on this slide as well what the funds can be used for. So the funds can be used to pay for tuition, fees, room and board, books, or any other educational expenses, including the cost of special educational experiences abroad or away from campus, or expenses to complete or enhance your undergraduate education in preparation for graduate school. So again, that's fairly broad. There are a lot of things you can do with this funding, but it is a scholarship, and so there is some flexibility in terms of what you can do with it. But in general, you should see this as money that enhances your ability to achieve your professional goals by going to graduate school. So you're preparing for graduate school, you're preparing for that career in your field. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about who the scholarship is named for. So the namesake is Lieutenant William Dean Hawkins, and I want to share a little bit about him. So Lieutenant Hawkins was a resident of El Paso and an excellent student. He graduated from El Paso High School when he was 16 years old, and he received a scholarship to study engineering at UTEP. UTEP then was, of course, known as the Texas College of Mines, and I went into the library archives online and found this page from the yearbook in 1929, which is around the time when Lieutenant Hawkins would have attended UTEP. So the cars, I believe, look a little different. I think that building might still be there, but I'm not actually sure because I haven't yet, since taking this position to join UTEP, I haven't yet been to El Paso or to UTEP. So I'm assuming that picture looks more familiar to you than it does to me. Lieutenant Hawkins joined the Marine Corps shortly after Pearl Harbor was attacked. And in November 1943, he led his men into action against Japanese-held Tarawa in the Gilbert Islands, where he was unfortunately killed in action. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his heroic acts above and beyond the call of duty. When we think about the Hawkins Scholarship, this is another aspect I want you to think about as you write your application. Think about what Lieutenant Hawkins represented. You don't necessarily have to write about it, but just to kind of take in this sense that he was a leader, he led selflessly, he was committed to the service of others. And these are traits that the selection committee will be looking for. Okay, so let's talk about what the selection committee will be looking for. Okay, I'm going to pause here as Dr. Wilson is arriving, so I'll just add her here and we'll continue on. So Dr. Wilson, I see you've just joined us. I'm going to continue with the presentation and then we'll move to your remarks after that. But let me first make you a co-host here. Let's see. If I can find you. Okay. Make co-host. Okay, great. All right, so let's talk about what the selection committee will be looking for. So there are four main criteria, And I actually want to tell you a little bit more about the background of how this scholarship was created and what it's meant to do. So you notice that we are aiming the scholarship at juniors, students who are not quite at the point where they're going to grad school, but they're thinking about it. And part of this is because there are a lot of opportunities for students such as yourselves to apply for funding, to have your graduate studies funded in their entirety. So you've heard of scholarships like Rhodes, Mitchell, Marshall, Gates, Cambridge. These are all programs that pay for you to get a graduate degree in another country. And of course, the Rhodes Scholarship, we know that our very own president was a Rhodes Scholar. And so this is a connection that I want to draw for us, is that this scholarship is meant to prepare high-achieving students like you for opportunities like Rhodes. So when you get to your senior year and you're applying for graduate school, I also want you to be coming to talk to me in the Office of Student Fellowships and Awards about what other opportunities you could be applying for. So as you enter this process of applying for the Hawkins Scholarship, I want you to think of it as your preparation for these other opportunities. So it's all about getting that practice along the way, crafting a personal statement, doing an interview with a committee of leaders and experts in their field, all about getting ready for those future opportunities, whatever they may look like. So the selection criteria on this slide are drawn from the Rhodes Scholarship selection criteria. And the committee will be looking for academic excellence, which you all possess, but it has to be tied to several other key characteristics. The second point there is leadership, so moral force of character and instinct to lead in ways important to mankind. The third is having energy to use your talents to the fullest. So this, for those of you who are familiar with the Rhodes Scholarship, might sound like that idea of the well-rounded scholar, someone who's not only academically excellent, possesses leadership skills, but is somebody who has other talents that reinforce and make them more powerful leaders because they have those other aspects in their lives. So that could be anything from sports, music, debate, dance, theater, artistic pursuits. It's purposefully broad. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then the final is truth, courage, devotion to duty, sympathy for and protection for the weak, kindliness, unselfishness, and fellowship. If you think back to the brief overview I gave of Lieutenant Hawkins, that is what he represented, all of these things, and that's what we're looking for in our Hawkins scholars. And I should also note here that financial need is not a criteria for selection, so at no point will you be asked to provide any kind of financial information in the application. So let's talk about the application itself. What does it look like? The application is online, and on September 1st, the link will be available on the sorry, just looking at a message here. The link will be available on the Office of Student Fellowships and Awards website. So that I posted here. I can repost that link. So this is our website, and the link to the application will be posted there on September 1st. But you have here the prompt for the personal statement, which is also available on another page that was in the invitation I sent you about the Hawkins Scholarship. So you can already see the essay prompt and get started on your essay now. But the application has 8 parts. In the beginning, first 3 parts, you'll provide some basic information about your eligibility, personal information, academic information, your major, etc. Then we get to the heart of the application, which is the personal statement. So we'll spend some time today working and starting to work on the personal statement. And I've put the prompt here in the box to the right. So this is your introduction of yourself to the committee. If you think about a fellowship application, a bit like a job application, you provide a resume, which is part 5 of the application, but you also have to write a cover letter of sorts, and that's what the personal statement is. Now, you might think that it's easy to write a personal statement because it's about you and who knows you better than yourself. but it's actually really challenging. This is what takes the most time, and this is why we're going to get started on it today. Is that you're trying to give a sense of who you are, what inspires you and drives you, and what makes you the future leader, what makes you meet all of those criteria that the selection committee is looking for. So that's no easy feat if you think about the fact that you have roughly 2 pages to do that, 1,000 words. So moving through the application components, provide the personal statement, resume, a transcript. An unofficial transcript is fine for the application stage. If you're selected as a finalist, I'll ask you to supply an official transcript. And then you'll also have 2 letters of recommendation, one of which must be from a faculty member. You'll also provide a photo, which will not be part of the application that's shared with the committee, but kept by my office, because if you are selected as a recipient of the award, we will use the photo in the press release. Okay, so let's look at the timeline. And after this, I will introduce Dr. Wilson. The application timeline. So we're looking at a fairly close application season right now. The application opens in just about a week on September 1st. And the application deadline, the final deadline, is October 5th, 2020 at midnight, 11:59 p.m. So I have to emphasize here, because before joining UTEP, I was teaching, and I know that there's often flexibility with deadlines, or there can be for coursework, but with fellowships, Hawkins, and any other fellowship or scholarship you apply for, the deadlines are very firm. And so I know that you're all excellent students and you wouldn't need an extension, but just bear in mind that any materials to be considered have to be received by the deadline. And this goes across the board for all scholarships. So in that month in between the application and when it opens and the deadline, what kind of support can you get as you're working on your application? You can contact my office. So I am hiring master's students who will provide coaching on essays. So you bring a draft in, they can give you some broad feedback. Remember that all of the work in the essay must be your own, but we strongly encourage you to get as many eyes on the essay as possible. The more perspectives, feedback you can get, the better. So the Office of Student Fellowships and Awards, my office, can help with that. The Writing Center on campus offers live sessions, or you can send them your essay and they will give you feedback on it. And once you've gone through those first 2 steps, I would then encourage you to share your draft essay with a professor or 2, perhaps one that's writing your letter of recommendation, who you trust to give you some honest feedback about how you could improve the essay. So I always remind students, and I remember from my own experiences applying for fellowships in graduate school, that applying for money is always a humbling experience, because the goal is to present yourself in the best way possible. But to do that, you have to be vulnerable and tell your story and allow others to give you feedback on, well, here's how you can make your message come through more effectively. So that's what that process of drafting the personal statement is all about. After the application deadline, the selection committee will meet and they will choose finalists who will then go on to the interview stage. And so around mid-November, finalists will be identified and notified. Those finalists are then required to attend 2 events, and these are on November 23rd and 24th. On the 23rd, they will join a social event with the interview committee. And this is a chance, so I say a chance, an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get a feel for the committee, and then for them, first and foremost, to get a feel for you as a scholar. And it's kind of, I sort of have a hard time describing this because it's a bit of it's not the most common part of a process that you might have seen for graduate school or for other scholarships or fellowships you've applied for. And it's something that I've noticed is fairly unique to the Rhodes Scholarship. And what it is it's really a chance to get some experience presenting yourself in a professional manner outside of the formal interview. So I think it's a very valuable experience, but it is one that's fairly ambiguous. And so during this process or this part of the process where finalists are preparing for these two events, so you have the social event and then the next day you have your interview with the committee. During this time, the week before that, after you've been notified of your finalist status, if you've been selected for that, I will be in touch with you to help you prepare for the two events on the 23rd and 24th. So we can offer mock interviews, get a chance to knock that first interview practice out of the way so that when you get to the interview itself, it's not as new. And then also a chance to talk about, well, how does one sort of carry oneself in an environment where it's social, but it's not purely social because you're interviewing essentially in a different way for this opportunity. So we offer support there as well. After the interviews, the committee will meet and they will choose their two recipients for the scholarship. Okay, so I will stop my screen there and let's see. Okay, so I would like to now introduce our very own Dr. Heather Wilson. So President Wilson became the 11th president of UTEP in 2019 after serving as Secretary of the US Air Force. She's the former president of the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology and served 10 years as a US representative from New Mexico. She's the granddaughter of immigrants and was the first person in her family to go to college. And she graduated from the US Air Force Academy in the 3rd class to admit women and earned her master's and doctoral degrees from Oxford University in the UK as a Rhodes Scholar. And so I'll turn it over now to Dr. Wilson to talk more about why the scholarship was created and what we're looking for and just the significance of this type of scholarship at UTEP.
Well, good afternoon to all of you. I apologize for struggling to get into the Zoom meeting. I don't think I had the right code, but I'm here now. So thank you. Thank you for your patience. And Melanie, thank you for setting this up. When I arrived here at UTEP, one of the conversations that I had with the provost and the vice president for academic affairs was to look at graduate fellowships. And we've had students who have graduated from UTEP and gone on to earn fellowships, particularly the Gilman. We've had a recent Fulbright. We've had a couple of Truman Scholars, National Science Foundation Scholars, but not as many as I would have expected. And I think part of it is getting the word out about how these scholarships work and that they actually exist. And then creating an office of fellowships, and Melanie has now been with us, is it 9 weeks now, something like that, to help students identify opportunities that you might be interested in, because these are very competitive national fellowships, and to try to give you the practice that might be needed to be successful. We had an information session that some of you may have attended last fall, and I was stunned by the number of students that signed up to come and just to learn more. All of you got an email about this meeting because your deans have identified you as exceptional students, or in some cases you're involved in the honors program. And so congratulations on obviously impressing some of your faculty and the staff and the people who work with you. I told this story last fall, but I wanted to share it with all of you again. There are, I've served on the Rhodes Selection Committee in 3 different states, and I was the secretary of the Rhodes Selection Committee in New Mexico for some time. It was always my perception that students who went to public universities always thought that scholarships like this were for kids who went to Harvard or Stanford. The best students at UTEP can compete with the best students anywhere. I do find that students at public universities need the encouragement to know that you can. And so that's one of the reasons we've established this Office of Fellowships, and honestly, it's one of the reasons behind the Hawkins, is to give you the opportunity to see what that's like, to apply for a prestigious scholarship, and to go through that process before your senior year here at UTEP, when I think some of you should be applying for graduate fellowships and looking towards graduate school. Melanie told you that I was the first person in my family to go to college, and that was a really big deal, to go to the Air Force Academy. I never knew, nobody in my family, I grew up in a very small town. The only people who I knew who had gone to graduate school were lawyers or medical doctors. I didn't even really know that you had to pick a major when you went to college. I mean, I was kind of clueless. But when I was at the Air Force Academy, I had a faculty member who was teaching me computer science. And I took the first computer science course in the summer because I was trying to get my course load down the following fall because I was involved in a lot of things, and really loved computer science. And had this conversation with this faculty member who asked me why I was doing it in the summer, and we just kind of got to know each other a little bit, and he got to know a little more about me. And he said, if you weren't busy with all these other things you're doing, you could apply for one of these scholarships. And he mentioned the Rhodes. Now, I had no idea what he was talking about, but he told me I couldn't do something because I was too busy. And at least that provoked me to at least find out what he thought I couldn't do. And I walked into the scholarship office, and there was a woman working there whose name is Fern Kenyon. She had been an administrative assistant in one of the academic departments, and then had moved over to run this scholarship office. And I told her that what my faculty member had said, and she said, well, go over there and sit down and look in that book of things, and then tell me if you have any questions. And so I started looking into this a little bit more. In the end, I did apply for the Rhodes. And I actually, you have a choice on the Rhodes to either apply where you go to college or from your home state. And I figured, heck, I'm not going to get the scholarship anyway, so I might as well apply in my home state where at least I could go home a week early for Christmas. I mean, I was very pragmatic about this. And I didn't, when you apply for one of these fellowships, you can't expect that you're going to be, that you will actually earn one of the scholarships or be awarded one. So I kind of went into it with, I'm going to do my best, but nobody deserves this, right? There may be, somebody may roll the dice and you may end up being awarded one of these scholarships. So you do your best, but you can't go into it thinking that somehow you deserve it. And then I ended up earning the Rhodes. It was life-changing for me. It was a full ride scholarship to go to graduate school at Oxford University in England. And I benefited tremendously from an experience that I never would have been able to do on my own. And so I think that our students here, we have students at UTEP who are highly qualified for the kinds of fellowships that we're talking about. And I would encourage all of you to reflect on what you want to do next and whether any of these fellowships feel like they fit for you. And if they do, go ahead and give it a try, and take advantage of the services that Melanie's office is offering. For those of you interested in applying for the Hawkins, it's intentionally set up to be very similar to those of the kind of graduate fellowships. We will award two $10,000 scholarships, and they're not just to cover your tuition and fees and those kind of things. It's intentionally broad so that if there is something that would enrich your experience at UTEP as you finish out your undergraduate degree, whether it's a summer abroad experience or a special educational experience of some kind, it's intentionally broad so that you can participate in something like that. And enrich your undergraduate experience. It is also not based on financial need. It is, and that is also intentional. The fellowships that you all may be applying to after you graduate from UTEP are not based on financial need. They're based on merit and alignment with the goals of those graduate degrees. So I would encourage all of you to think about this. You wouldn't be on this Zoom call if there weren't people in your college who didn't think highly of you. There's something special about you. And I think maybe over the next 6 or 8 weeks here, reflect on that. What is special about you? And why is it that you're going to change the world in some way? And if you can articulate that effectively, you may be the right person to earn the Hawkins. Melanie, is there anything else that I should touch on?
I think that's great. I appreciate it. And we got a question here in the chat.
Okay.
Dr. Wilson, did you ever go back to the faculty member who said you didn't have time to apply?
I think he probably had moved on by the time that I graduated. But I did have, and Melanie was talking about people who would write letters of recommendation and those kind of things. Think carefully about that choice for you. Who are the faculty members who know you well? And it has to be at least one faculty member. And is there someone else who can tell your story in a way that causes an interview committee to say, you know something, I want to meet this young person. There's something about them that's special. And think about how they tell that story. A letter of recommendation is, the most important thing is your personal statement and your resume that says what you've really been doing with the hand you've been dealt in life. But your resume, your letters of reference can sometimes fill out different parts of your personality and things that otherwise wouldn't be known about you. There's a young man who works here now in Van Horn, at least part-time, who I recommended for a Mitchell Scholarship probably 6 or 7 years ago now. And that was the case for him. So he's incredible engineer, wonderful, effervescent personality. He's going to do great things in life. And it was from one of his letters of reference that we found out that he'd been going back, it was 3.7 GPA. This is in Western South Dakota. And he's going back and forth to the ranch every weekend to help his dad with the ranch because his mother has been fighting a bone infection for like 6 years. And eventually, she was born without a hip joint. And eventually had to have her leg and her hip amputated. And this doesn't come out in his application. It came out from one of his references that really part of his passion for biomedical engineering is because of what he was seeing, that he knew he could do this better. And this just absolutely blew the committee away. So think about your letters of reference filling out some part of you that maybe your personal statement doesn't.
Absolutely. And so that's what we'll be thinking about when we get to the personal statement as well, everyone, is, how do you tell part of your story and how do you build an application where others are filling in and telling parts of it for you? So at this point, we will move to the questions and answers. Dr. Wilson, you're welcome to stay with us if you'd like. I'll be answering the questions. So if anybody has any, feel free to put them into the chat. I'm also going to unmute or allow everyone to unmute themselves. So I've clicked that. So if you'd like to ask a question verbally, feel free to unmute yourself with or without camera. It's up to you. And you can also put questions in the chat.
I have to say, I think it's Maria Zarate. I love Elmo.
Oh, is there? Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, Maria
I got it
has
now.
Elmo on fire as her picture. I think that's great.
Oh, that's very much captures the moment. Nice. How are there no
questions from anyone?
Yes, hi. This is Dave Macias. I have a question.
Yeah.
So for me specifically, I'm planning on applying for the fast track program for my my college. I'm in the College of Engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And so this program is going to be like I'm taking like both undergraduate courses and master courses. So would that affect like my eligibility when applying for the Hawkins scholarship?
It wouldn't affect your eligibility as long as you will complete your bachelor's degree. I think it's by the summer of 2022. And you keep your options open. If you were, David, if you were to apply for a say, for example, for a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, that could pay for your graduate degree, whether it's here or somewhere else. So one other story, when I was a senior at the academy, I was taking flight training, which you're supposed to do as a senior. And I already had a slot to go to pilot training when I earned my Rhodes Scholarship. And there was part of me that was thinking, maybe I should just go to pilot training. And I had this flight instructor. So they called it dawn patrol. You get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go flying. And this guy was the most boring guy as a flight instructor. So it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired anyway. The guy could actually make you fall asleep talking directly to you. I mean, he was just the most boring guy, but he did one really good thing for me. He said, and this was early in the morning, he said, I hear that you're thinking about turning down your Rhodes Scholarship and going to pilot training. And I said, well, yes, sir, I kind of am. And he said, don't be stupid. Go to graduate school. You can fly airplanes later. And David, if you were blessed enough to earn a Rhodes, a Marshall, a Mitchell, to send you to graduate school, and that meant that you set aside doing your master's degree here, I'm going to tell you the same, don't be stupid. Take the Marshall, the Mitchell, the Rhodes, go to graduate school. If you want to come back and do your PhD with us, you can do it, okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you for your advice.
Sure.
Okay, so we have a question here in the chat. If we receive the award, do we have to use all of it for the remainder of our undergraduate degree, or can we use some of it towards our graduate degree? My sense is that you could keep it if you wanted to, but you'd probably want to spend it on things that would enhance your experiences now for graduate school.
It is intended to help you finish out your undergraduate degree strong here. So it can cover, tuition fees, room and board, books that aren't covered, but also a special experience. And it's intended timing wise to be able to give you time to plan that. What would you do next summer for a special experience that would make your undergraduate experience even better that you could not otherwise afford to do? Because, well, you thought you were going to have to work next summer. And instead, what you're going to do is that experience abroad, or that special research project that your faculty member has told you about, whatever it is. We really want this to be about enriching your undergraduate experience and doing something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
Good question. So I'm going to go through some of these. We might not get to all of them, but there's one. I know the scholarship is aimed for people applying for graduate school. Would we apply? We plan on pursuing an MD, PhD?
Yes. It is any kind of graduate program, and an MD, PhD program. One of my good friends, in fact, I texted her this morning to get her email to see if she'd be willing to mentor some of our students. Her name is Ramona Doyle. She did, so when I was doing my work at Oxford, she was in the same class. She's gone to Sewanee in the South, and she went on to be an MD, and she practices medicine in San Francisco now, but she did a master's degree in science. So she did a research master's for 2 years at Oxford and then went to medical school. So that's completely within the realm. And for the National Science Foundation, many of the National Science Foundation graduate research fellows are working on PhDs. So it's absolutely appropriate.
I have a question about the recommendation letter. One comes from a faculty member at UTEP. Can another be from El Paso Community College?
It can be from anywhere else, somebody who knows you well. You may have two who are faculty members, but there are some students who created they have a second letter from someone who knows them well in a different context, whether it is an internship or co-op that you were on, or you've been very active in the National Boy Scouts or in your church. Or remember, this also is about leadership and commitment to others. Many of you have been volunteering out in the community and serving others and working with a nonprofit. The person who's the executive director of that nonprofit may be a very good reference for you to fill out that part of your life and story that's not just purely academic.
Okay, so we have a question here. How would our success be observed throughout the scholarship program? My thoughts on that are that if you're selected as a Hawkins Scholar, I want to be working with you to decide which graduate fellowships you should be applying for. So that would be one way that I would measure it. Dr. Wilson?
That's certainly one. If you're chosen among your entire class of almost 4,000 students to be a Hawkins Scholar, it means that that you are clearly a high potential student for a graduate fellowship. But it also has given you the experience of having gone through this once. And that's part of the intent here as well. So it's intended to be a scholarship that's highly competitive for UTEP students.
We have some questions about eligibility, which I can answer later on. But yes, so we are getting into, I think, the time that I had set aside for the personal statement activity. So I'll do that as a separate workshop.
That's okay if you want to switch over, but I'm also happy to answer questions. I'm really so glad that so many of you were able to join this afternoon. Or really appreciate it and your interest.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Wilson. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for creating this scholarship. When Dr. Wilson told me about this scholarship, I said, this sounds great. This sounds like exactly what you need to get students thinking about fellowships of the kind that my office will support you in applying for. So thank you so much.
All right, look forward to seeing some of you. We are still going to try to do the reception on the 23rd of November in person, but obviously we're going to have to judge based on the circumstances at the time. But that reception will be at our home at Hoover House, and it's intended to be just as Melanie described it. It's kind of it's social, but it's also an opportunity to meet the members of the selection committee in a little bit more informally before you walk into the room for a finalist interview. I'm really glad that you're all interested in the scholarship, and I'm glad that all of you are thinking about graduate school as well. I look forward to getting to know all of you a little better. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left, and so I'd like to go through some of the other questions that you've put in the chat, and you're also welcome to ask questions by unmuting yourself as well. So the personal statement, I want to talk a little bit about that since I've decided now that we've been filling the time with questions, and so what I will do is I will send out an invitation to everyone who registered for this workshop or this information session for a workshop to work on the personal statement. But I think what I'll do actually is show you the worksheet that I had created and the one that we'll use. Let's see where it is here. Okay, share screen. Okay, so this is the, share it. This is the worksheet that I have created to help you start thinking about the Hawkins Scholarship. So what we'll do in that workshop, I'll try to do it fairly soon in the next week, is you will interview each other based on these questions. So what are your educational goals? What led you to study what you study? Career goals, and then really getting more personal into who are you? What are the details of your life that have shaped or influenced your goals and who you are today? Personal characteristics, integrity, compassion, etc. How can you draw some examples from experiences in your life that demonstrate to the committee that you have the characteristics of a Hawkins Scholar? And then finally, talents or skills. How can you tie those into your leadership abilities? So I can share that. Let me know in the chat, would you like me to share that before the workshop? I don't want to give you very conscientious students the sense that you should be doing more work. So we can work on that in the workshop. And then we'll also look at some successful examples of Rhodes Scholarship personal statements and look at some best practices. Okay, so I see a lot of you want it. You're all go-getters. I should have anticipated that. I will send it out to you along with the invitation, which I hope you'll register for. It'll be another hour and possibly an hour and a half where we can sit together and look at some successful statements and really start at the beginning of brainstorming your thoughts and looking at the final product and how is it that they're describing who they are to a committee of people they've never met. So let's go through in our last 10 minutes or so. I'm going to go through some of the questions that you've put in the chat. Let me find that again. Let's see here. Okay. So I'm going to scroll back up. So there were some questions about, let's see here. So this event will be recorded. It'll be available on the website. So if you have any friends who weren't able to join us, this will also be available. The credit hour question, Ebony, if you can email me and we can talk about that. Let's see here. I have had some questions from students who said, I don't meet the eligibility criteria for Hawkins. Are there other scholarships I can apply for? I would also like to talk with you, work with you one-on-one. And once my office is up and fully staffed, there'll be others that you can work with as well. But my website, and I posted the link earlier, has, I wonder if I still have that saved. Yes. So that's the link. Oh, I think I just sent that to one person. Let me send it to everyone. That website, if you click on Find Fellowship Opportunities, there is actually a list of graduate and undergraduate scholarships and fellowships that UTEP students are eligible for. So I encourage you to look through that list and then schedule an appointment with my office and we can talk about the field you want to go into and what types of fellowships could potentially match what you're interested in doing. Let's see. Other questions. So a question about the letters of recommendation in the chat. So do the applicants upload the letters or are they sent directly by the recommender? They are sent directly by the recommender. So when you get into the application, you'll have a place where you can enter the recommender's information, their email address, and write them a short message and then request the letter. But what I recommend is if you know after the session that you want to apply for Hawkins, think about which professors could write those, or professors and others. So it doesn't have to be, both don't have to be from professors, but think about the two people who would write a letter for you and reach out to them and say, you know, dear Professor so-and-so, I'm interested in applying for the Hawkins Scholarship. Could you write a strong letter of recommendation for me? And the reason I say ask if they can write a strong letter is because sometimes faculty have various reasons why they feel that perhaps they wouldn't be the person who knows you best and would be able to write the letter. It's not that they don't know you and like you, it's just that you want to make sure that since you don't see the letter, and since it comes directly to the reviewers and the committee, you want to make sure that you're choosing recommenders who really feel confident that they can tell the part of your story that you want told. And so reach out to them first, get their buy-in, and then send them the link through the application. After they write the letter, thank them. Another thing you can do to set yourself up well is before the recommendation is due, send them your application materials, even in draft form. Send them your resume, your personal statement, and it always helps to give them a sense of what parts of your application package you want them to talk about. So if you did an internship where you were in charge of a small team, you could ask that person to write you a letter and say, can you talk about my leadership skills in this one experience? So you think about when the committee gets your application, they've never met you, chances are they don't know you, and this is your only chance to introduce yourself. And so the more you can get others to tell parts of your story, the bigger, fuller picture the committee has of who you are. Okay, here's a question. So a question I was asked, if a letter of recommendation can come from a teacher you had in high school, I would say yes. If this is a teacher who knows you extremely well and has known, you've stayed in touch with and knows what you've been doing throughout your college career, absolutely. Mentors, you can meet mentors at any stage in your life, right? So maybe your high school teacher was a tremendous mentor and you want them to write you a letter, by all means, but make sure that all of your letters come from people who know what you've been doing since you've been at UTEP. Any other questions? Okay, so there's a question here. If we feel we have more than 2 recommenders that could write a strong letter, could we submit more than 2? That's a good question. For the Hawkins Scholarship, there's a maximum of 2 letters. So we request 2 and you should provide 2. But the reason why this is such a good question is because scholarships like the Rhodes, they give you a range. You can supply anywhere, I believe, from 5 to 8 letters. So it always helps to keep people in mind who could write letters for you in the future. We only require 2 for Hawkins, but graduate schools and most other fellowship programs like the Rhodes, they require 3+ letters. Any other questions?
Dr. Mainzer, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So just to clarify, the Hawkins Scholarship, it can cover not only your graduate when you're working on your master's, but also the remaining of the undergrad degree?
Right, so this, and I wanted to explain a little bit more earlier, is that, so it's one stipend of $10,000. And so you'll receive that. And as Dr. Wilson was saying, the goal is for you to use that money to set yourself up well for the next stage for graduate study. I know $10,000 may seem like a lot, but when you're trying to say, if you did an internship that wasn't paid, or you needed to travel somewhere for a research project or for study abroad, that $10,000 would go fairly quickly. So I would think of Hawkins, just for everyone, to think of it more generally as helping you position yourself in the best possible way for graduate school, because it's unlikely that that money would last through, I think, another full year.
Thank you.
Oops. There's a question here, and 1 letter must be from a UTEP faculty member. Now that is a good question, so let me go check what we say here about the letters. So 2 letters of recommendation, at least one of which will be from a faculty member. I think that this letter, and so the things that I'm telling you are, I will be managing the selection committees, so the criteria that I'm telling you, they are, and I know that when it says from a faculty member, it sounds a little vague. UTEP faculty member, could it be from a transfer institution? Could it be from a faculty member who supervised a research internship? I think yes, I think we leave this open because we want you to pick a faculty member who knows you really well. So if that's someone at another institution, by all means. Let's see here. There would be another Zoom session. So the time and day has not been established. My sense, so I'm new to UTEP, but my sense is that the 12 to 1 time period tends to work fairly well. Is that true? People let me know in the chat. Or would you prefer, actually, why don't you put in the chat, would you prefer a 12 to 1 weekday session, or would you prefer something after hours, say after 5 p.m.? Okay, we have a vote for evening. We have both. Okay, we seem to have a lot more for the daytime session. And so for those of you who can't meet at a 12 to 1 or a 12 to 1:30 session, there are resources available for you. So you and I can work one-on-one. Once you have a draft of your essay, we can talk about it. So one of the reasons I set this up as a workshop where we talk to each other for the writing personal statement workshop is because sitting down and just writing about yourself is actually really hard. And so the easiest way to start writing is to talk. and especially better when you have somebody who you can bounce ideas off of. So if you can't make the writing workshop, I will have master's assistants in my office that you can meet with. And once you have a draft, I'm also happy to meet with you as well.